Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today as we present our development for the TG51 support within Total QA. I want to thank everyone for taking the time today, and we're really very excited to present what we have and talk about where we are going as we move forward. I am Ariel Dixon. I am our Director of Operations, and I see many names joining that I know and some I don't, and I want to thank everyone for joining. I have with me my colleague Matt Whitaker, our VP of Engineering, and he's going to talk through and go into kind of the details of in the workflow moving forward with the TG51 support. So our general agenda today is to just talk through what our goals have been and introduce kind of our philosophy and approach, and then we'll get down into the details and walk everyone through, at least on a high level, what it will look like, the workflow will look like as people start to include this into their regular QA process. And then we'll talk just a little bit about our rollout plans and then what our next steps will be. It'll be a little bit of a phased approach, so we'll talk through that. And then we'll have some time for questions and hopefully answers at the very end. So I will try to address questions if I can as they come in just in the chat windows, but I'll kind of put together questions at the end, and Matt and I will address those together. So please enter them at any time, and we'll try to get to them. So I'm going to start just by talking about our general approach to development, and this is really along the lines of just our company philosophy in terms of Total QA as a product, but also specifically in relation to the TG51 support that we are going to show today. So first of all, like almost everything in our software, or everything I would say in our software, this really comes directly from our customers, and we've heard for now quite a long time that this was something really high on people's wish list, and they wanted to see us really have support for, so that Total QA really was total, and you didn't have a separate spreadsheet for TG51 that you could not include in the same place that you have all of your other machine QA processes. What we've tried to do is take our suggestions from our customers. We had great input, and we really appreciate. We had many current customers give us examples of their spreadsheets that they use now, meet with us quite often and regularly as we were, kind of looking through and consolidating what some of the different approaches could be. We also really wanted to be consistent with our layouts and kind of workflow functionality that our users are already used to for their other QA processes. So we tried to, really make sure everything fit in as well as we could. And with that, many of you already using the system may have noticed that we've made some changes, and part of this was the backend infrastructure that needed to change in order to support this. And we also found, along with that there were places that were just improvements generally to the workflow as we see it. So some of these changes that are already implemented, which you may have noticed, include having some configurations now on the machine level instead of what we would refer to as on the schedule level. So machine general setup sorts of things, which energies a machine has, their initial, if it's an SSD setup sort of thing. We also made quite a few changes to how we handle individual measurement equipment. So this, many of you may have noticed that we separated out ion chamber and electrometers. This was necessary for the TG51 support. I will just note for at least the immediate time being, we will still have for monthly types of QA when you're, we'll still have the system, what we're calling a system. So the combination of a chamber and electrometer with, those relevant conversion factors associated per machine, that will remain the same. But we will be able to decouple the electrometer and ion chamber for TG51, of course, and maintain those separate calibration, both documents and factors and sorts of things like that. Eventually, again, speaking to continual improvement, we'll be able to allow users to kind of pair things as they set it up. Without having to store kind of, all the separate conversion factors for those pairs. But that, again, will be a part of a, at least a phase 2 sort of release. A couple other things that came up during the development here, and I think just speak to our philosophy of continual improvement in the software, include things like, in working with customers, we saw some real, places for improvement and some of the workflow. So like save, there were some places where, you had to sign off and then save. And we occasionally saw that, there could be frustration if you only clicked sign off and then didn't save and lost work. And so we've already released and kind of addressed that all throughout the software. So not just in the TG51 new functionality, but went back and said, okay, where are the other places we can improve this? Another place is, again, in kind of the equipment management. We've added some functionality. Because of this, we've added some functionality to track tasks and documents for all of the measurement equipment and make it very easy for our users to see when the next item is due for, to go out to the Cal lab or for preventative maintenance sorts of tasks. So those things are now all in the single equipment workflow, and we've added so that we eventually will not have a separate tab for handling the conversion factors or calibration factors, depending on the device. So again, just that idea of continual improvement in our software always resides. So I'm going to, we're gonna kind of turn this over now a little bit to Matt. We'll do kind of a little bit of back and forth with our screens. And Matt is going to walk us through some of the basic setup. So this is kind of the initial machine configuration and measurement equipment configuration. So Matt, I think if you can take this screen, that might be the easiest.
All righty.
Thanks.
And all right. Ariel, are we seeing my audience? Yep.
At the TQA page. There we go.
Yep. Great. Okay. Thank you, folks. Yeah, so as Ariel mentioned, so, obviously before you start into doing TG51, there's going to be some things that you're going to have to set up in your system. And these are kind of one-time or in some cases like once a year type of factors that you're going to have to put in. So we divided them up into factors that are really associated with the LINAC, not really expected to change during the life of the LINAC. So this is really will be a one-time time setup for each LINAC. And then things that are associated with the, for instance, the individual chambers and the sort of the combination of the chamber and the machine. And then finally, there's a few things that might change even schedule to schedule. So I'll sort of walk through, again, as Ariel said, at a fairly high level of how you're going to set this up. So what we're looking at right here is this is in the management section of the service. So you have to be a physicist administrator to see this. This is a page that's probably familiar to many of you. So where you see all your sites and machines. So typically you'd see a whole list of if you have multiple sites and all the machines under them. I've got a very simple setup here, just one site, 2 machines. I'm going to go into this first LINAC here, and you have basic information for it. When you first get when you first enter into here for a brand new machine that you've had assigned to your account, you're going to see that this setup for photons will be unassigned. So so you'll want to go and change that to either SAD or SSD as it's as appropriate for your machine. The electrons, it does show as a drop down, but the only option is SSD right now. And then depending on how you set it up, what you're going to see is you're going to see for the TG51, you're going to see for, in this case, an SAD, you're going to enter what your SAD is, what depth you're going to measure at, and what field size you're going to do. In the case, if you're going to do it with an SAD setup, we're going to ask you for to choose which energies this machine is set up for. And then we're going to ask you for the clinical TMR factors at the end. You can then optionally put in an expiration date, different sort of viewpoints on that, but it is optional. Some people go, I'm never going to change that, so it never expires. But if you do put it in an expiration date, you'll get a reminder email, for you to go and review it. And you can set the lead time on that ahead of the date, say a month or 2 months or something like that. And you'll see that in a few different places in the software. For the electron beam factors, we've got the SSD, what the cone size is. You've got another option here of how you're going to enter the R50 values. So you can either, I chose here to enter them directly, but you can actually also choose to calculate them from I50 factors. So if you have the I50 factors and you choose that option, what'll happen is the R50 column there will become locked. You won't be able to edit it directly. The I50 column will be editable. You put your I50 factor in there, and the R50 is calculated from that. So it gives you kind of an option for how you're, depending on how you have your factors. And then you're going to put the PDD percentage in for each of the chosen energies. So as Ariel kind of mentioned, this is one of those areas where there's some, we think there's some beneficial side effects in the rest of the software. So if you've got a large organization, almost inevitably you've got some energies, right, for certain machines that don't apply to any other machine. So the nice thing about this is once you set this up with the energy in this machine, anywhere else in the software, where if you're, say, even setting up a monthly or a daily schedule where you need to set up energies, in this case, like for photons, all you're going to be able to choose from is 6x and 15x, because that's all this particular machine does. So that way, it kind of simplifies a few things and, prevents errors in different parts of the software. So that's fairly simple. You can attach any documents you want to this, so any supporting documents that you use during while filming this out, you can attach them so they're right there available for this setup. Once you're finished, you're going to sign and update the machine. So you would just click there, put in your username and password, and it'll update, and then that's logged against your name. So you get a complete history here. You can see older ones that were done and when they were changed and things like that. So you get a history of that, and we'll see that in a few different places. Here's just the a slight variation on that. If you'd had on the photons and SSD setup, really the biggest difference is here you're going to be entering the SSD obviously, and you're going to be putting in the clinical % FDOS instead of the TMR. So that's sort of the main change between those two. So those are that's the sort of setup that's at the machine level. The next sort of level of setup is when you're setting up your various measurement devices. So these are the ion chambers and the electrometers that you're going to use with your TG51 measurements. So this page here, as Ariel mentioned, we actually just rolled out some changes recently, but this is actually where all your measurement devices live. So these, in a normal account, you would have, a lot of daily QA devices like DQA3s, your SI QA beam checkers. If you're connected up to PIPS Pro or you're importing for MPC, that lives here. You kind of filter down that view. But in this case, we've basically got a couple of chambers and a electrometer here. So when you're setting up the chamber, you're gonna pick the chamber type from sort of a standard list. You do have, then it will load up automatically the default factors for that. So from the manufacturer's published information, those are editable. Occasionally, we are actually in the process of, I'll speak a little bit more about this at the end, of updating some of these ion chamber lists. But what we do kind of run into occasionally, if we see that a manufacturer has a different name, sort of a different model name, but that the relevant factors are just about the same. So that's just sort of setting that up. But what you also need to do then is add the calibrations for that. So there's two parts to that. In the case of an ion chamber, you're going to do the actual equipment calibration. So this is entering the factor in centigrade per nanocoulomb, which you get from the calibration lab with the calibration date. In this case, you would definitely want to put in an expiration date. You could attach a document, so you could attach your actual calibration documents that you got from the lab. So again, they're all kept in one place. Sign off and calibrate that. And then there's the factors that sort of depend on not only the ion chamber, but also which machine you're using it on. So in the case of this one, let's go take a look actually at this one because it's got a little bit more. It's got both electrons and photons. So here I've set it up associated with this machine, and you can set up multiple machines with the one ion chamber. You'll want to set up you're going to be setting up the KQ factor here for the photons, and then the K prime R50 factor for the electrons. And again, you put them in, sign off on it, and they're updated, and you can see a history of previous calibrations in there of who did it, and we can see who signed off on it. In this case, it was myself. Okay, so that's basically, and then the other piece that is there is much simpler to set up is the electrometer, and really all you're sort of putting in there is any settings for that electrometer. So if there's standard sort of setup settings that you wanted to, make sure that it was set to when you're doing your TG51, note those there, and your electrometer factor. So if I'm going to make those changes, I've now signed off on it, and it's updated, and that'll be recorded in the system. So now I've set up my machines, my chambers, and the last part is going to be setting up my my schedules. So those of you who are already users,
Matt, I'm just going to interrupt you here for one moment, just to address a couple questions that have come in. And again,
sure.
we will get to a lot of this, maybe as you're seeing these things completed. But while you see there are now, kind of pieces that are associated with a machine or a piece of equipment, a lot of this information like KQ and things like that, first of all, you can see that you can set due dates and have it so that, a lot of these things are, will be updated annually as part of the TG51 process. And you'll see as Matt gets into completing the actual template that a lot of this data actually gets filled into the form. So yes, we do understand that things like measuring KQ in particular, this is something that an in-app KQ calculator is something we'll talk about as a phase 2 rollout. But again, those are things that will be a part of the form that you'll be able to, track longitudinally and also update annually. So even though we understand, okay, some of these things are per machine, but it is still, will still be tracked and recorded within the TG51 template, the form that Matt is about to show you. Thanks.
Yeah. All right. So at that point, you've set up your various factors for each machine. You could you set up KQ factors for each machine if you wanted. As you go through, you set up your LINAC, and now, so as many of you are familiar with, of course, is Total QA is built around schedules, and you schedule each for things like daily and monthly and all those. Do it almost exactly the same way for TG51. So this is probably pretty familiar with you. And one of the things that you'll see is you'll see that there are templates added, standard templates. They're not editable, unlike sort of a regular template. They're a little bit more like the built-in templates that we have that you can copy. In this case, you just sort of use them as is, although you can change the name of the schedule if you want. But if you see here, if you've got, for instance, a Photon SAD setup, we don't allow you then, it won't let you put the SSD setup accidentally on that machine. So for a template, so it has some smarts there. You're going to tell it what groups are allowed. So the only people who are ever going to see this are physicists and physicist administrators that are connected to the equipment. Here you can, if you want to change the name slightly, you can do that. And then you can set up, similar to what you do for many of your other schedules, you can set up a frequency, probably typically yearly here, or leave it as ad hoc, if you just want to, manually put in the next due date or something like that. So once you've added that, there's some QA settings that you may want to set up. How many MUs you plan to shoot on this, if you don't want to fill it in each time, what the collimator angle is, so that those are pre-filled, and then what your voltage settings are going to be on the in this case in the electrons at your positive high, your positive low, your negative high, and what you're going to do. It is expecting the order to be either positive or negative high first, and then high low second, and then the opposite sign high third. Here, the other thing that you can set up is how many fields how many readings you're expecting to take. So that'll just sort of give you anywhere between 2 and 5 readings across as a in the entry sheet, as we'll see. So this way you can kind of set what policy you're kind of expecting from people throughout your organization, and so that's sort of the last the last part of the setup. This is very specific to the schedule. So you could actually change this from schedule to schedule. And one place where you could even think about maybe putting multiple different schedules on is maybe on the photons, where you have FFF beams, and because one of the things that you can set up ahead of time is this PRP factor, which is sort of the on the flattened beams, generally it sits at 1, but on the FFF beams, because you've got this sort of drop off across the ion chamber there, generally that has to be changed. So in that case, if you're going to do that, you may want to leave that blank, and so you have to fill it in as you do it, depending on how you do it. Or you could even have 2 different schedules, label one used for FFF and one non-FFF, and do it. So like a lot of things in Total QA, there's a few different ways to handle this. So now basically I'm totally set up, and again, most of those are going to be one time or once annually kind of setups that you do. So on a regular basis, you're going to choose the schedule from the available schedules that you have under the machine, and you're going to start your entry. So I certainly I've got one pretty much filled out here. You're going to pick the energy. So obviously it just gave you the energies that you would set up for it. See, once you've picked it, it sort of stays up top there so you can see it. Put in the participating physicists, some notes on why you're doing this. You pick the any ion chambers, so it'll give you the list of ion chambers that are set up for that machine and that energy. And if so, you'll pick them from, if you've got a choice, you'll pick one. It fills in the information from what you've saved. With the electrometer, you're going to pick the electrometer from a list. It's going to fill in the amounts. Most of this you'll have set up previously. So these, like the depth and the SAD and the field size, that all came from that initial setup you did for that machine. So it knows what knows what machine you're doing this on, the collimator angle. You could either fill it in here, and the MUs, you could fill it in here. But in this case, we had it preset and it pulled it in. So the KQ factor, that came in from what you already had entered for the machine and the energy. So it looked that up, filled that in for you. You're going to fill in the temperature pressure for it. This one's set up in kilopascals. And then it will calculate for you the temperature pressure corrections. Then you're going to basically put in the readings. So here I'm doing this photon readings. I put in my photon readings. I put in my actual voltages in case they vary slightly from the nominal ones. Once you've put those in, that calculates out for you the polarity and the ionization or the ion recombination corrections there. So those are calculated for you. Here again, we had preset the PRP factor, but alternatively, you could be entering it in here. And then the conversion it'll convert the raw reading to the corrected reading for the corrected reading that you're actually going to use for the dose. And then it will calculate the dose delivered to water at your chosen depth, typically 10. And then the TMR factor will have been pulled again from the machine for that energy. So that's pulled in automatically, and then calculates your dose delivered to water at Dmax. So at that point, then you've got a choice. If you're not going to do an adjustment from that point, you can actually say, no, I'm not doing an adjustment, and the rest of the measure, this last section here will actually disappear, and you can finalize it from that point. But if you're choosing to do adjustments, you can set the number of MUs. I actually put it to 200 here just to illustrate that. Then it'll scale the target reading appropriately to the number of MUs you have in here. Then you do the readings, average, gives you a final dose. So at that point, once you're done, there's a few little indicators on the side here. So once these lines sort of get, once these dots all get filled in, it's all filled out. You can adjust the report date if you need to.
Actually,
and
Matt, before you
Yep.
finalize, one thing, if you wouldn't mind pointing out a couple of the places where we have
Yep.
what we call sanity checks. And here, I think that's just to note in this form that we do have some of those in place, please.
Yeah. So So if I were to enter accidentally 300 for the for that voltage, it will give me some correction for that. And you can see once it was blank, everything else kind of blanked out. So there's some things like that where we do some sanity checks on there. There are actually some on the Linux setup. For instance, if you were to actually put 10 in on the say the SSD, it will tell you that that's a pretty unlikely number. You probably meant depth, and so we've got a number of those kind of through the through the software to kind of help do that. It's actually an area where we're looking to add a few more and do that. So another thing along here, by the way, is you can add comments sort of at any time. So if there's comments you're making as you're filling out the form, you can add those, and those go into the record as well. So you can add comments at any level here as well. You can save your work as you're going. So if you get to a certain point, you've got to walk away for a few minutes. You can save it and come back. Once you're finished, you go to finalize it. You can attach any final document that you have, that you may want to attach on there. Any final comments?
And just so, for example, I mentioned, the second phase when we'll have a KQ calculator, for example. This is likely a place where, certainly we understand that it'll be ideal to have it embedded, but, for now, for the time being, at least to be able to include that in here with this report. That's, for example, that's just one place you might do that.
Yeah. Yeah, so that you can keep it all in one place. Okay, so done. Whatever I want to sort of say on it. Finalize that, and it's and then it will create my report for me. So the workflow on the workflow on the electrons very similar. You're going to go through, pick your fact, pick your ion chamber electrometer. It'll pull out the relevant factors for your R50, figure out your DREF, pull your KE cals and things like that, fill those in for you. And then you're going to, enter your electrometer readings again. It'll figure out the correction factors for you. So in this case, there's this other correction factor, which is the ratio here between the depths, and then but the workflow is essentially the same after that on sort of broad strokes. And the same with the photon SSD. The main difference being, instead of using at the end the TMR factor to go back to dose at Dmax, you're going to use the percent DD10. So, but the overall workflow is basically the same. At the end, you've got your report here. You've got any comments that you have through it, and sort of comments at the test level. It is possible to actually track some of these from year to year if you've got multiple years in here. So there's some of these factors that you can track over from year to year. So if you want to compare them between the 2 years, once you've reviewed it, you can do a final sign off. So up to the point where you've signed it off, if I have not signed it off at this point, I can reopen this. It'll log it in the comments there that Matt reopened this, and I can leave some comments on here as to why I did that. Perhaps I saw something that was misentered or something like that in the review, and I can fix those kind of things there. Once I sign it off, that's it. It's locked. And then the other thing I can do, if I really needed to, I could void the report from here. This is another opportunity at this point to add a document to the report. So we try to give you as many opportunities as possible to do that. And then once I've signed it off, it's got my signature, digital signature on it. Other people can come and sign it off as well. So if you have a policy where more than one person will sign off on a TG51 sheet, then that's quite possible as well. So on the those then appear onto the report list. One little change that we're about to do here, probably be pushed up to our sandbox a little later today, is we're going to append the energy onto the end of this schedule description, so it's a little easier to tell without having to open the report which energy you were doing that on. But anyways, it's in the report list. You can actually also, if you open it up, you'll see you can either print those or send them out to a PDF if that's something that you need to do for your organization. And so that's, yep.
Sorry to interrupt. And here there was a question just about how kind of the setup as you see. It is a per energy report, so you basically complete, per energy, complete that report, and then start for the next energy. But again, here, and especially once we have the addendum with the energy included in the schedule name, you'll be able to very easily filter. You say, okay, here's just this machine and only the TG51 photons, and you'd be able to filter by easily see for that particular year that all the energies were done and completed. So yes, we do understand. There are some some places where we were trying to fit this into the schedule. We didn't want to have a schedule for each energy per se, and also we wanted it to be able to be flexible. So we do understand that not all of the energies are in a single report, but maybe Matt, at the end we could talk about some of the kind of future development with reporting that we might be able to address those issues with. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, so if you actually want to throw your, we'll make throw your screen back up here if we can. Yeah, perfect. So yeah, so yeah, a couple of notes, and sort of obviously, and anticipated a couple of questions here. So yeah, well, we've been showing this. I mean, this has come up a couple of times, is to be able to do the KQ calculations in app, and we definitely plan to do that. The very first release, though, will have you enter just directly the KQ. What we're one of this kind of comes a little bit to the philosophy of how we like to approach things, and then I'll just make a quick note on how we'll probably approach the KQ calculations. One is we generally don't try to get out too far in front of the customer on the release. This project's a little bit different because you definitely can't release 20% of TG51. You have to get quite a ways over, but we kind of felt we could sort of do a release without necessarily that in, without and still have pretty much all the abilities that we felt were absolutely necessary in there. On the KQ calculations, our plan approach will probably be to use the curve fitting method that introduced in the McEwen addendum to TG51, the 2014 addendum, where they have the factors listed out for the various ones. That will probably be how we will approach in-app KQ calculations, but that should be fairly soon. Like most of you see, that are existing users, we do a release usually every week. So as soon as it's done and validated, we'll be adding that in as a capability. Consolidated reports. So we're actually doing some work right now on, in general, in the software, on being able to consolidate, like do a report summary of things like, say, all your daily reports for the the month. So that's actually some active work that we have ongoing in development. And that will be something that I think we'll look at for this, is how to consolidate, sort of the individual reports for the different energies into one document. Either, to actually just export them all into one PDF document if you need to supply that, or do it from there. So that is something that we have on our radar. A couple of, not too often, but a couple of times come up just as parallel plate chambers, and we'll kind of see.
Just so you know.
Okay. All right. Good. Okay. Yeah. So currently we don't support parallel plate chambers, and it'll kind of depend on demand. I don't see, I haven't looked hugely into it yet, but sort of a basic look at it is, I think once we've got, now that we've got these other ones done, that won't be a huge lift. It's sort of variations on a theme in a lot of ways. So as everything, I'm sure, like if you're a normal user, you've realized now that two things get things done. One is being a squeaky wheel, and so if there's something you want in the software, let us know. And two is sort of any sort of informational assistance, validation assistance usually lets examples and that kind of stuff usually helps things move along a little faster. All right, so we go to the next slide. So where we're at right now as far as development of that, one task we do have to kind of get completed here in the next week or so, 2 weeks, is updating the ion chamber list. So right now we've got a lot of the chambers in from the original TG51 documents and the addendum there. And so we've been gathering some information from the various manufacturers on what their current offerings are, so that we can kind of update the standard list of chambers in there. We've got some polishing to do on some of the user interactions. The other thing is certainly sanity checks. We've got we're trying to add in as many sanity checks as we can, and any suggestions, sort of as we're beta testing for what where you would like to see sanity checks. And then we'd like to do, sort of one fairly comprehensive, another set of beta tests. So, every time we talk to you folks, it's always informative. We get to, I can't think of anybody who didn't point something out in the as we were showing it everywhere, from mock-ups through the last couple of things. But I think we're actually kind of sort of circling the final product right now. So I think our target is to get that next round of beta testing done in this next month. So if any of you are existing users, or you're in, certainly in trial, so where you got it and you've got TG51 coming up, or you just want to say, hey, I'd just like to work with it with, say, my last year's data and just see how it would work, contact us at support@imageowl.com, and we'll set up a session with you. And just to wrap up, as Ariel said before, thank you to many, many people on this. We've had a lot of very generous feedback, people taking a good chunk of time to explain to us, often very patiently, some of the finer details of TG51, and it's been a big help. And with that, let's talk about any questions.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
So I've tried to address some of them as we're moving along, but there was one that came up which I think is useful for everyone, asking about attaching IROC reports. So, you know, quickly the answer was yes, of course you can attach it as a document to reports, but Matt, maybe talk a little bit about what we are exploring in terms of actually being able to parse some of that and pull it in, such as we've done this now with some PDF tools, and Matt can talk about this a little bit, which might be of interest to everyone.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you for asking that question. Actually, that sort of popped into my mind earlier today too. Yeah. So certainly, as Ariel said, you could always just you know, as you're putting in your cal factors for the you know, for the chamber or things like that, you can attach those kind of documents. But that is something we've looked at. So we've got a couple of places, you know, things like Sun Nuclear Profilers and things like that, where you'll just give us the you know, the PDF, you drop it into the system, and we parse the relevant data out of it so that then you can track it over time and stuff like that. And we've been looking at the IROC reports, and we're pretty sure that we're going to be able to parse those so that you can actually, you know, pull the numerical data out of those and be tracking it over time. That's so that's, you know, something I can't say exactly when that's going to be done. We'll probably want to finish this up first, but it's definitely doable. We have some examples from some of our customers, but I could always use a few more, and it's something that I think will get done sooner rather than later. So
yeah, thanks. And we do have a question about entering the absolute value of the readings, or does it have to be sign specific? And I actually remember the conversation, but couldn't remember the answer. So
okay, yeah. So the answer is right now. Right now, you do have to enter you know, appropriate signed entries for the electrometer readings.
Yeah, and there was one other question about the temperature and pressure being entered for every energy. So yes, along with you know, what I said previously about the reports being per energy, the temperature and pressure will not port over, you know, even if you're doing it on the same. And we have, you know, our customers have told us, we've heard this now anecdotally a few times, that, you know, pressure can actually change quite a bit, even, you know, hour to hour. We do have, you know, customers working up high in the Rockies and things like that, where there can be, you know, pretty significant shifts, even, you know, in a short period of time. So yeah, that does have to be entered each time. And then, and just for everyone, there was just a note about kind of calculating of averages. You saw, as many of our customers have seen, you know, we've added some flexibility throughout the software in terms of, in places where we are calculating, taking an average, for example, of multiple readings, like we do in monthly output, where we allow flexibility in terms of how many fields there are. We had, you know, because some people's internal procedures, they, you know, wanted 2 readings and some wanted 4 readings. And so we've tried to be very flexible in having those preset. There's always the option to disregard, to uncheck a particular reading and take it out of the average. And it did look, Matt, I just want to confirm that we're not actually, even if you have it set as your procedure with 4, it doesn't require it, or will let you go on, or it will. Is that correct?
It will. It will, and it doesn't count it as yeah, and it does not count it as incomplete. So yeah, you know, initially I think we were going to make it so if you set it for 3 or 4, you were going to in TG51 you were going to have to you were going to have to do that, and then as we were beta testing, you know, it just seemed kind of the consensus was for people that they said, no, you know, I want to preset it, but I don't want to be kind of bound to absolutely have to put that in, you know. So we made it a little bit more flexible.
Yeah. And there was another question about testing for chamber cross calibration.
That's a really good question. And yeah. I don't have a short answer for that. I guess the short answer is we certainly haven't built that in now, but that's actually a really I'm actually writing that down because that's actually a very interesting question and something that I think we'd have to take offline there. Yeah, but yeah, that would be sort of a probably a fairly obvious extension of this project. Yeah.
Yeah, and another one which I think would be great moving forward too, as we're thinking again, I see some really good questions and comments that will again direct our next phases of development. But one is just about if others would be interested in having a method to place commissioning data as a reference to compare to your annual data, and then decide which one to use for the calibration. So yeah, I think that's the commissioning data. Certainly that's interesting. Matt, do you have any specific thoughts?
I don't have any specific thoughts right now. I can kind of see where you're where you're coming back. I think and I have a feeling I know who asked that question, so that's out of the audience. But I think that's actually an interesting question. So I think that's one where I would say it would be something that I'd want to, as we're doing beta testing, is sort of bounce off a few different people and see, sort of, get some thoughts from some different people. So maybe kind of flesh out what that might look like a little bit more. And then, one of the things when we do some beta testing is usually kind of chat with people about, some different ideas and sort of get some feel for whether that would be something people would use. Yeah.
Okay. I think we got to most questions. Thank you everyone for your engagement. And like Matt said, I think everyone knows how to reach us. Please do. We're happy to, have further conversations looking forward as we complete the final kind of validation testing with those of you that have so generously volunteered to do so. And yeah, we do have, just for those interested, we do have another webinar coming up on the
next
use
Wednesday.
of the machine log next Wednesday. So if anyone is thinking about adopting that within the Total QA platform, please join for that as well. And yeah, we thank you and look forward to hearing comments and always the valuable feedback from our customers.
Yes, thank you. And this session, we do have a recording of this, so if we'll have a link available, so if you've got colleagues or anything that couldn't make it. So, yeah. Great.
Okay.
All right, thank you very much, and everybody stay safe.